Welcome to Overheard, a peek inside the deep diving conversations between therapists. I'm Dr. Victoria Sturkin. Join me in conversation with my mentor and fairy godmama, Dr. Nana JoySee. The conversation you're going to overhear today is about impulsivity. Chapter 2 of Nana JoySee's book, Our Relationships with Our Children and the Child in All of Us, brings in the concepts of caution, consider, and contemplate as Glowy gets excited, but she has trouble slowing down, something that I think all of us can relate to. We touch on polyvagal theory, safety in relationships, and the way Nana JoySee offers the sequence to teach ourselves and our children how to support impulsivity when dangers are possibly present. Hi, JoySee.
Hi, sweetheart. How are you? I'm so excited. I so look forward to this.
I do too.
Yeah, and I look forward to also knowing others are going to partake in it, and I welcome them. I don't know who and I don't know when, but a part of me feels their presence
Yeah.
and it warms my heart.
Yeah. Well, and that's beautiful to begin this conversation with because we're calling this Overheard because it's two conversations between people who are very deeply intimate with each other and love each other and have family connection with each other. And we also hold this professional relationship. And you're bringing in the layer that there's an audience now.
Mm-hmm.
And that we welcome people to hear this and how important it is for people to hear these conversations about very important topics that you touch on in these stories. And when we bring in this idea of audience, we're bringing in another layer of awareness. And so it's both intimate, but also there's a level of intimacy that we're staying with, knowing there's an audience there. And I'm bringing that in because in a future chapter, we're going to talk more about that. And so I just want to plant that seed because that's happening. And we want to spiral the
Mm-hmm.
learning, especially as we're introducing a chapter that really touches on how do we learn?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I want to just say the name of the chapter, which is that Glowy gets very excited as her interest in the big world grows, but she has trouble slowing down. And I want to mention that what you did for us just before we hit record right now was you slowed us down
Mm-hmm.
and you moved us through your process of preparing for this.
Mm-hmm.
And as you read through the chapter, and this is my favorite thing to do as I'm reading, I always have a pen in my hand because hopefully I'm reading something that I'm responding to and reacting to. And so I'm always underlining and jotting things down. And you went through what you underlined and jotted down. And then you also went through everything that you underlined and jotted down and distilled that into a summary that we
Mm-hmm.
discussed.
Yeah, and it was so important for me to do that because, especially in today's times, people think, oh, I saw it once, I know it.
Yes. Yes.
And
They don't know it.
they don't. They don't. Learning is like good, healthy intake of food and digestion. And most people eat on the run
Mhm.
and they don't allow themselves to let the saliva, seriously, the saliva start saying, oh, something is coming my way. And let the body that has all of these built-in healthy responses do what they were created to do.
Yeah. Well, which is so interesting because even beyond the fact that we're not sitting down and eating. A lot of people aren't cooking. And when I learned that the digestive process begins as we start cooking, and how many of us are missing that?
Mhm.
And I'll
Mhm.
notice myself, I could be deep in work all day and I don't realize that I need to eat. And
Mhm.
I'm not hungry, but it's time. And so I start cooking. And as I'm preparing the food, hunger arises. And knowing that that's when the digestive process starts, I'm more consciously attuned to that in my body. And I could stay with that as it arises.
That is so exquisite what you said. It's so exquisite because the body itself lets us know, but we don't listen.
Yeah.
Fortunately, you know the importance of eating. And so your thinking brain, that's top down, says, oh, it's eating time. And then you know enough to start preparing and not just call in something and grab a sandwich. And as you're doing something else, take some bites. So even though you don't initially listen to your body in the beginning, you've begun a learning dialogue which says, I could take care of what my brain wants to do, what I want to do with the outside world. I could do several things because I acknowledge my body is there.
Mm.
So you're doing it from top down. With children, we really, really need to do it from bottom up.
Yeah.
And you had enough of it early on, but then when you realize what you didn't have, you cultivated your own self growth in a grouping of people that at those periods of time were caring and helpful and sharing.
Mm.
Doesn't mean they were always that way. It doesn't mean that that phase of time of sharing and development continued to the next phases, but you were able to take it in and grow it. So you could say, oh, food time. And then you shift so that your body's pacing was acknowledged. And then you connected with your body. And so you're thinking and you're touching and your eyes and your nose and your hands and the movement and the music you may be listening to all became a beautiful orchestration.
Yeah. And
Didn't
so
happen
much.
overnight. No, it didn't happen overnight.
No, no, it's woven and spiraled through. And you're bringing in some of these concepts that are very present in this chapter. For one, this idea of having a supportive group of people to learn with. And that's at the very beginning of this chapter. Right?
Mhm.
Chloe says there's a line in the very beginning of the
I
chapter.
will look and see if I could find it. Chloe saw the older teens waiting to pick up the younger sibs. As always, they were sitting and waiting for them under the big climbing tree. She put her hand on her chin, one finger touching her lips. Maybe, just maybe, they would know about this, she thought to herself. And with that, she went running over to them. And it took her time to become familiar with them. But they were there, and they were there every weekday to pick up their younger sibs. And she had seen them talking, and she had overheard the way they talked. And she experienced how they felt and shared, and how they welcomed her in, and how they greeted their younger siblings.
Do you remember if when you were writing this chapter, the initial question that Chloe had that she wanted to consider and contemplate with these teens, with this older group of people
Mm,
that felt safe for her, where things were moving really fast and she wanted to do things really fast? Was that something that she noticed and it startled her? And her mom brought that into you, or was mom aware that Chloe was moving very quickly and a little more impulsive than normal?
mhm, mhm. That's exactly because I was talking with her mom,
Okay.
and so these stories are just created as I felt what Chloe had been feeling. I felt what her mom remembered feeling. So this is an amalgam of many, many people that I've talked with, shared with, taught
Mhm.
my childhood, my noticing what my friends were like
Mhm.
when I was in my early 20s, looking at kids running. And I said, whoops, this child is going to get into a lot of trouble later in life because I saw the impulsivity was not being attended to. So this is a story that encompasses much of my experience,
Mm.
mine, what I've seen, who I've talked to, what I know as a teacher, what I know as a psychologist.
And so to ground people into this chapter, we're talking about a moment when Chloe
Chloe's mom was concerned, and Chloe was also starting to sprout and grow, and she became clumsy because at that point, she also didn't know where her body began and ended.
it's so interesting because just today I was talking with a mom about her daughter, who at this point is 9, and she's noticing that there's an uptick in this impulsivity and a certain behavioral pattern that is resurfacing from when she was little. And she's talking about this pattern and she's talking about the impulsivity. And I said, wait, how old is your daughter now? She said, 9. I think she's going through a new developmental stage. And the awareness that impulsivity sometimes comes in very potently when we are at a new developmental stage. And if we don't catch it, that stage doesn't integrate fully.
Mhm.
And this chapter does such a beautiful job. You, JoySee, obviously wrote it, did such a beautiful job really taking us through some of the steps that both the individual needs to take and the parent or the guardian or the teacher needs to take to really help somebody integrate a certain developmental phase that we've entered into. And how do we learn to step into that part of ourselves more fully?
Mhm. Mhm.
And you bring in these 3 words: cautious, contemplate, and consider.
Mhm. And I'm pausing.
Yeah.
It's very important for us to really say, what do these words mean? And why are they important? And what do they protect us from? And what do they then allow us to do and allow us to do with joy?
Mm.
What are these states? How do we play with them? How do we use a word? I'm going to consider this. How does that feel differently? How does it taste differently? Consider, contemplate.
Mhm.
Are they the same? Why are they different words?
Right, it's funny when we think about the difference between even cautious, consider, contemplate. Cautious to me feels like that initial, um, cue that I need to give my body to pause, to slow down. Consider feels no, contemplate feels a little more embodied, and consider feels like it's going into more of a higher brain.
Mhm. So I wanna pause here, savor what you said, give people a chance to think for themselves, because they may have different meanings to each of those words. For me, knowing the world, we don't have to agree. We just have to say, oh, this brings up that it's in my head and I'm considering it
Mhm.
or contemplating it.
How does that differ for you? Consider versus
Don't know. Notice I'm playing with the word now. The and I'm pausing because I have to separate myself from what you said because I could go into the feeling tones that you did,
Uh-huh.
but clearly they're different. So I'm going to say cautious is saying, I don't know this well.
Mhm.
It really says, I don't know this well. Doesn't mean I have to be frightened, but it says, okay, what do I need to be more comfortable with? What needs to be more familiar? What do I know about this? I grew up in New York, crossing the street. I'm always considering, how am I going in which direction? When do I cross? When do I keep walking? When can I weave? Goes on all the time.
Mhm.
When I'm considering something, for me, it's more in the instant. There's some options, and
Mm.
there's a sense of, let me consider. It's even what kind of food do I want to eat today? Let me taste what feels right.
Yeah, consider I'm feeling there's imagination that's brought into that.
Mhm. And I am playing with possibilities. I'm thinking of, I did this today. I want to tell someone something, and I considered what's happening in their life. It's not urgent to be done today. I said, no, better do it another day. And so I made a little note in my book. So I wouldn't obsess on it. I
Mm.
wouldn't feel an urgency to tell them, so it's off my brain. It's in my book. Done. I considered them. If I'm considering what food do I want, well, what does my body want? I'm going to taste it.
And I
Some
feel like bringing in that word obsess over is important because I think these days there's so much anxiety and fear in the air that people can go into more obsessive thinking, and to have this place of consideration to land in is
Mhm.
a choice that we could make so we don't have to always be in obsessive thinking, but we can give ourselves time to consider things.
Right. And with here, where I'm going to bring it as a very important distinction, considering is in the here and the now. So it leads me to contemplate that I'm taking time. It's not where I'm going to make a decided action within a very short frame of time. And I'm going to take things in a more theoretical way. And for me, theoretical is what's the underpinnings of the decision, not just the current taste. So it's deeper thinking for me. So when I say theoretical, it's very practical for me.
Mm-hmm.
And when you said we're so frightened, the thing is, we're then not using our thinking brain.
Right.
What physiologically happens, and people don't truly realize it. They think, come on, think. And they don't realize the person is angry or scared way below conscious awareness.
Yeah.
And if you want someone to truly be able to participate in changing what's going on in them and in their actions, we have to help make them really in this container feel safe so their thinking brain comes back online, so their ears can truly hear conversation. When we are frightened, we do not take in sound of voices in the same way as when we're in a safe brain state. So we will truly miss a lot of the words and believe what came through is what the other person said.
Right.
But we know biologically when we're frightened, we absolutely cannot hear in the same way. The little bones in our ears do different things. It's like in a guitar, we tighten the string or we loosen the string. So we get the sound when we pluck the string that we want. And when we get scared, people don't know this, but the tone in that part of the ear changes so that you hear deeper sounds, because biologically it was the deep sound that was dangerous. So we could say, why aren't you listening? When if we truly understand this, we say, whoops, this person is scared.
Yeah.
Even if they're yelling at us, it's whoops, this person is scared. My first reaction is to be scared. I could say, oh, it's dinner time. I have to shift gears. The way you said, oh, it's dinner time, I could say, oh, person's scared. My nervous system is getting tight. What do I do to help myself? In the story, Glowy knows after school she could turn to someone, which gives her patience to wait. There's someone for her to turn to. She has soothed herself with the knowledge that there's truly a safe place, a safe feeling place that she could turn to. In this day and age, we're bombarded. And so important to at least start. We don't have Twinkle Toes and her friends. We don't have the climbing tree in the schoolyard. But we could, in our apartment, on a wall, put up pictures that truly remind us of comfortable times. We could look around and say, are we sure that no one's going to pop in the door or break in the window? And we have to remind ourselves of those facts.
Yeah.
And that may not be the fact for some people.
Yeah.
So the question is, where can they go? And sometimes I know that with one of the people that I study with, people in the war-torn countries tune in to her workshops because for that hour and a half, they feel comfort and sanity and a voice that touches them and helps them get in touch with their body. They know the world outside hasn't changed, but they know they could give themselves that place to turn to that truly says, I have a respite.
Yeah.
Hopefully, the people listening to us don't have those intense worries. They have the anticipation that is being done to them. They're not going through a developmental growth stage. They have the media stimulating them in a way that there's nothing they could do about it in the moment, but their body is stirred up. So just as Chloe is learning to do certain things, just as Chloe looks at Twinkle Toes and the act of seeing Twinkle Toes move, the act of seeing Twinkle Toes face lean in to listen, and her face isn't, oh my God, what's happening? Her face is smiling, delighted in being there with Chloe. This is what we need to build in, a little at a time.
And what is really interesting in this time that I'm noticing, and I'm going to say something that I want to then weave into what you wrote about in this chapter, which is instructive. It's instruction. A lot of people are turning to ChatGPT and asking questions when they don't have the Twinkle Toes and the supportive people around. And some people who have supportive people around are also scared and embarrassed to ask certain questions because they feel they should know and they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are asking these questions to the chatbot,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is wonderful in so many ways. And what I think is so powerful about the clarity of what you've written in this chapter, JoySee, is it gives people prompts to know what to ask. Because you're talking about in Chloe's understanding of cautious and consideration and contemplation, you take us through the steps of how do we learn what's dangerous, what we truly need to practice caution around, how to get to a place where we can consider our options and make choices based on what we've analyzed in our consideration. And you bring in that before we could trust that decision and even trust our contemplation process, that's a place to pause and ask the question, hey, this is what I'm considering. Are there other choices I'm not seeing? Hey, this is what I'm considering. Of these two, which one is the more dangerous one? Which one is the safer option? Chloe, thank God, had her mother to ask and to teach her, and then had Twinkle Toes to ground her in this teaching process that she goes through with her mother, and all of Twinkle Toes' friends who give all the examples of what they've experienced with their parents. But a lot of people don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, in thinking about how people are using technology right now, your chapter gives people a really clear guide to know, what do I even ask?
Yes.
What are the questions to ask?
And what I would love people who truly are reading this or listening to us is we're touching. Dr. Porges uses the word neuroception.
Mm-hmm.
he is talking about what we come into the world with. What is our biological reactions? So, and I pause. I pause because we will all have biological reactions. And it is so wonderful if we could help people ask the question, prompt ChatGPT, and I'm using that big word.
Good job, JoySee.
I know I work with someone who uses chat and then comes to me so that, and this is what I want to juxtapose, so that he can then have distilled information that he could then say, bring it to my feeling body, bring it to who I am, bring it to my experience, and he could contemplate it
Yeah.
with me in the atmosphere of safety and of being held in high regard, where there's no embarrassment. He could shift emotions, and I can hold a space for him or for her as upset and anger well up. But because I know them and I know these emotions, and I know 90 seconds of set off anger emotion, if it's not fed, will settle and our thinking brain will come back online. And because I'm not frightened by it, it has its expression and it's not stuffed and locked in. So, what I'm juxtaposing is ChatGPT offers so much. And if we could help people know what to ask, but then to say, how do I feed the body that carries me through life?
Yeah.
How do I feed my heart that has been beating from the earliest days of my emerging into a human form? How do I settle so my tummy really says, oh, you are aware of me, or you're aware that you have a tummy? For me, my tummy has an existence, the way the microbiome that live and are a part of my existence. I regard them. I regard them as me and yet other within me. And I have to treat them the way I would love to be treated. It's not just words, but as we grow this, and we don't grow it overnight, it's a little at a time, to say, oh, this made me feel better.
Mm-hmm.
I would,
What was so funny to me, someone recently asked, "Are you nervous that ChatGPT is going to take away your role as therapist?" I said, "No, I think that as long as we're still being born out of a human body, we will still need the resonant field that you're describing and that we create in therapy."
mm-hmm,
I very much welcome the technology to do some of the heavy lifting
mm-hmm,
to prepare someone to then be in receptivity so that their interoception can develop with more comfort and safety
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm,
womb-like containment,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
which is important.
Very important. And people differ. There will be people who are realizing they are hungry for something And too often, they're falling ill. And so they realize one of the best ways of stopping illness is to understand what are our biological essentials. I have another thought because as our world is evolving with technology, there potentially can be a lot more time for people to get back into their bodies, depending upon how our world structures resources. But there is that potential for great sharing. But we have to understand that it's built into us. The minute we got a vagus nerve,
The ventral vagal.
the ventral vagal. Yes, I was wanting to think of how I was going to build this. So wonderful. Before we had a dorsal vagal in the very beginning of our own gestation, as well as species gestation. And something happened where the ventral vagal, the dorsal vagal, started wiggling and finding another place. And it connected to nerves that fed the heart and the face and the ears. And the minute that happened, we had a chance to signal to one another how we feel. And something happened during that time that built in the exquisite possibility of being in a safe state and really building cooperation and building love and building nurture. And so we moved from the reptiles that saw the earth as a part of itself. I love reptiles. They connect to the earth in a way we can't imagine.
Mm.
But then we mammals started growing our young inside of us and being there to take care of them. And if we did not have this new part of the vagus nerve, none of that could have happened. What came before, which came first, chicken or egg? I'm not going to even think about that. But the exquisiteness is we have it. And it says on this very big level, we are meant to cooperate, to care, to share, to be creative. And if I go way back to Dr. Candace Pert, she said the molecules of emotion of joy is in every living molecule. That means for me, before we had fear, we had joy and we came together. And then different stages says, we are now different. How do we deal with our differences?
We need cautious, consider, and
And
contemplate.
contemplate and pause and a
And-
little at a time.
Yes. Yes. And repetition to
Yeah.
take in a little at a time,
Yeah.
which means you may need to read something more than once.
Mm-hmm.
You may need to watch something more than once.
Mm-hmm. You may need to consider something more than once.
Yeah. And have several conversations to get more perspective in and to allow
Mhm.
more of you to settle so more of you can be online to take in what's
Mhm. And the important awareness, which is new to almost everyone, is that when we get thrown into a fear brain state, we could stop the high alert, but to go into a safe brain state, the body needs very specific stimuli, experiences.
And what's so beautiful, and I want to go back to this in your writing, before Chloe was expected to know how to keep herself safe independently, her mom knew enough, and she knew to come to you to really get more support and instruction and organization around this. But it's first we do it all together.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see in the story, mom knows I step back, but I step back not completely. I step back so that as consideration is coming in, Chloe has mom to interface with to really find comfort and true safety in that stage
Mm-hmm.
before making the decision and acting on it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the repetition that you bring into the writing of all of the different pieces of the process and where it's repeated with support and where we gently step back with support, but don't completely make the support disappear is all very important. And I think so many parents don't feel supported themselves
Mm-hmm.
to have the patience to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have to be fed, literally. We have to be comforted. We have to find soothing so that we can go into our safe brain state. So it's not just, oh, I'll pitch in, you could go off somewhere. What is it that we need that switches our heart and our brain and our vagus nerve to let us go into this safe brain state? It's very important.
Yeah. You also, JoySee, bring in the importance of the fear brain in learning
Mhm. Yes.
because she got very startled in the story when
Mhm.
mom raised her voice or spoke in a tone that imprinted fear.
Mhm.
How important that actually.
Mhm. Mhm. And it was built in that things are dangerous, but we could learn. But until you learn, and so there had been enough experience where mama protected Chloe so that she wasn't startled. She may have been alerted.
Mhm.
She didn't grow up with a television blasting. And often in homes, our parents are at their wits' end. And thank God that the TV is there for them to have the children watch something. Hopefully, they monitor what they're watching.
Yeah.
But it's very, very important because most of us didn't have it. Can we have moments, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, where we say, this is special time so our body can truly relax and reboot? 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I would love it to be so much more. But if we begin for ourselves and our children, and we say, right here, mama and papa will have soothed themselves enough that they can be patient with their children or with their partners.
Mhm.
And then they say, okay, I wish I could do this all the time. I know at this moment I can't. So I leave the room. I cannot promise the way I will be. I will try and learn.
Yeah.
But we have to know that certain things are dangerous and certain things are only dangerous because we don't have the built-in resiliency of being able to put our safe brain back online. And so much of the work that I do with adults and through the adults to the children, through teachers to the children, is how to recognize that you're not in a safe brain state. And what are the little movements to do to help settle our bodies?
A woman I was speaking to last week who is an immigrant in the United States and doesn't have a big support system, found herself getting into a relationship that she would not have gotten into if she was receiving enough
Mm-hmm.
in community, which would allow her to feel more security in herself. And she recognized in our conversation that the lack of overall support put her into dangerous situations because she made
Mm-hmm.
decisions from a deficit.
Mm-hmm.
And interesting for her to notice, wow, lack of community, lack of support means I'm in more of an insecure, unsafe part of the nervous system spectrum. And in that place, I'm not making clear choices.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not able to heed caution in the same way because I'm too hungry.
Mm-hmm. 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 I'm going to backtrack a drop and also add to what you said, but they're not direct comments. I want to be clear, if we have the ideal world, that it's a very protected environment as the child is being gestated and born. There always is distraction, but that's the wonderful thing. As you're playing with your fingers as a newborn, a month old, there's noise, but then everything settles. A mama is there, and you notice through the empathy of the connection between mom and baby, it's okay. So it's like the deer alerting, they check it out, and then they all go back to what they were doing. In those instances, mama is being the giver of, oh, it's okay. And so there's the built into the nervous system, well, I'm alerted rather than I'm startled. From infancy, we could experience the difference, and then only rarely in an ideal world are we startled. And then startled comes in when Chloe's mom says, dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
But Chloe, in the ideal world, had enough resiliency that she'll startle, freeze, stop, and then relax.
Mm-hmm.
Feel the connection with her mother, go into a safe brain state. So, fear brain is important for us to have. It's built in for survival. That's our reflexes. But mom is there and has such a history that she could settle and say, I will teach you so you could touch the stove safely.
Mm-hmm.
I will teach you so you can have the joy of cooking with me. I will teach you so you can have the joy of cooking on your own. And so there the whole story starts with the ease. Most people don't know that in utero, reflexes begin when we're itsy bitsy and just connected to our umbilical cord. There's lots of umbilical amniotic fluid floating around, touching our umbilical cord. And so mom is moving and we go back and we go forward. We go back and we go forward. And we go up and we go down. We are attached and we're safe, and there's enough amniotic fluid for us to move in. That gentleness is the beginning of the reflex.
Mm.
And as we grow, the movements change and the womb becomes tighter. And then we start pushing and pushing. And if we have enough resiliency to play with the pushing, we stimulate the reflex. We have enough tone, we stimulate the reflex. And those reflexes bring us from this womb water world to the gravity world. So what's a reflex and a startle was built on da-da,
Mm.
da-da. So we had the ability to go back into safety.
And to come back into connection with yourself.
Yes, first through mama,
Right.
first through other, giving you the chance to build it with other and with self.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, there's this interplay, but starts with safety. The first few days, we are embraced by the universe. We are not being fed by a mom. We're being fed by much more subtle nourishment. And that's in each of our histories. And so that is there. So that's one piece of how do we weave safety and danger, but it was woven for us to build on when we were in utero. And then I said something very interesting to a woman who is in her later years now. She was always a thumb sucker.
Mm.
And joining the program that I am a part of and help to lead, she gave up thumb sucking. We're talking about someone that's way past 60.
Wow.
Then she said, you know, I really watch what I eat, but these days I realize I'm eating my rice crackers much too much. And it's,
Mm.
and she says, I'm missing something. I have to stop it. I said, no, why don't you do this? Why don't you take the dye that they use for cooking, so healthy, natural, and take the rice cake and draw a face on it and put a name of someone that you know is there for you. Because eating is saying you're needing more than food nourishment. It's going back at this moment in time to you're missing more people. But your body connects eating, obviously, with being nourished. And in this instance, this woman is with the group I'm with twice a week. So she could, in a very tangible way, I said, put my name on it.
Mm.
And I put on a funny hat. I said, make it with a funny hat. I said, and then eat it. So you're not just eating the food, but the social context is being woven with the memory of being with us We could play the recording again and see it. The anticipation of seeing the whole group that has come together in a very nurturing way. So it's interesting. We have to be creative. I never said for anyone to do that before, but I know with kids, we decorate the cookies.
Mm.
We do all kinds of things. We make animals. So to understand, there are many different ways of taking in, and sometimes we have to do it very concretely.
And I'm assuming that some of the ruptures in development that created more of a dependency on her soothing through thumb sucking to a very old age, you're bringing her through certain developmental stages by making it playful
Mm-hmm.
and stimulating some of that childlike magical thinking of we get to draw on our food.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what's also interesting, I don't remember where I read this, but Porges did talk about how we will use eating for comfort to try to stimulate the vagus because of the chewing, except it doesn't work the same way as when we're actually relating to others because the ears aren't taking in sound and we're not taking in other people's facial expressions. But we're trying to replicate some parts of that process by overeating for
Mm-hmm. 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 And that's why it's important with this woman. We didn't tell her to give it up. She noted that as she was in the program, and we have movements along with the program, and we have intentions and rewires. So we help people focus right now. How do we want to be in the group? And then bring it into their daily life. I'm going to do an activity. How do I want to be in this activity? Do I have to practice certain skills, emotional skills, or physical skills? So we bring our thinking brain and our movement brain that really soothes the body. And we're in the group and we do it twice a week. We've become a caring community, and you could count on us being there. And it's all positive, all based on how have you grown? What are you struggling with that you want to do differently? How can we give you ideas of what to do, but intentions and rewires that are appropriate for your developmental level and your understanding? So we bring us into their thinking to use and turn to over the week. We need that consistency, and we need the warmth. We need the connection, literally, that our heart feels what is another person with us feeling. It's very interesting. ChatGPT will offer certain wonderful sequences and
Yeah.
clarity and options. But for many of us, we're seeking the human body in a way that it fills us rather than disrupts us.
Mhm.
Our ability.
Yeah. Which is why it's so lovely we get to do this
I
and see each
know.
other's faces
I know.
and talk through in such interesting ways.
I love this.
I love
And,
this.
and I love the feeling that as we're sharing, as I'm hearing you, as I'm learning what you're doing, what ideas you've gathered, how you've been feeling, that others are going to have an opportunity to grow. And in that way, it's like I feel like I'm a tree sprouting flowers and sprouting fruit.
Yeah. Isn't that beautiful?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we have enough nourishment right now that we can have patience, that who knows when some of this information will bear fruit for others.
Exactly. Exactly. But it's now, thanks to technology,
Yeah.
it's here.
That's right. That's right. Hmm.
I really love it.
Thank you for doing this with me, JoySee.
Thank you for sharing with me, Tori. I
Mm,
love it.
I love you.
And I love you. It's good.
It's very good. We'll talk again soon.
We will.